It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, would you accept £1,000 for a pylon? Now, before I do that, I must read a lovely message from Jackie. Jackie says, what a lovely, soft-spoken gentleman Ian is, because I just spoke to Ian Paisley earlier, makes a huge change from the raised voices trying to get their points across. Well, we're going to get back to that in a minute. But anyway, would you accept a pylon in your backyard? It's been reported that households closest to new pylons and electricity substations could receive money off their annual energy bills under plans set to be announced by the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, on Wednesday. Now, the move will come alongside plans to halve the time it takes to deliver new electricity networks to 7 years and a prioritisation of the rollout of electric vehicle charging points. So I'm asking, would you accept £1,000 pylon, £1,000 for a pylon in your backyard? Well, I'm joined now by Peter Edwards, a former editor of the Labour List, Brian Catt, physicist and engineer, and also Benedict Spence, political commentator. Right, I'm going to start with you, Peter Edwards. A pylon in your backyard, £1,000, and it's an annual thing you'll get, potentially.
I doubt I'd be offered it, and the thing is, most people wouldn't be offered it. In Ireland, where they have a similar system, it's only within 200 metres. So the proportion of the population this will have any impact on is absolutely minuscule, and it has very little effect on energy bills, which are up by 50% over 2 years, and a planning system. I didn't know this, I did have to look it up, but building electricity transmission equipment takes about 12 years, so it's incredibly slow. So it's not tackling either of those problems, infrastructure or energy bills. I'm very underwhelmed.
Well, the bottom line is they are going to put some new, using some new locations as well, I should imagine, because it's, you know, that's what it sounds like it will be. So it doesn't sound like it's just going to be alongside the current one. So you could end up being in the line of fire for one of them. Benedict Spence.
I mean, I would, if it's, you know, sort of a regular thing. And I understand Peter's point, which is that this is quite a sort of, relatively, it's not going to affect that many people. But I think it's more about sort of shifting the dial on things like planning and on just sort of rather broad, obstinate opposition to things being built anywhere near anybody. I think it's one of those things that will perhaps sound quite good to a lot of people who it might not end up impacting. But I do think that it's a bit of a sort of a piecemeal gesture, really. You know, if you're trying to sort of cajole people into not opposing basic things like energy infrastructure, then I think you're on a bit of a hiding to nothing. I think people need to be made to understand you can only really have sort of proper economic growth if you have cheap, easily available electricity. That means a sort of a constantly upgrading national grid. That means that pylons are going to go into places where people don't want them to be. But, you know, the alternative is your bills continue to go up, everything else continues to get more expensive as a result of that. But if this does go some way towards encouraging people not to vote against infrastructure that is in their own interests anyway, and I'm all for it. And yeah, I'd absolutely take a spare grand every now and then.
But why not reopen some of those coal? I'd be opening coal mines and things like that rather than building all of this. This is to support the new electrical sort of revolution that's supposed to take us all so that we can all drive electric cars. Brian Catt.
Well, but we spoke about this on Friday as well. What I want to know is, why do we need new pylons, new rights of way, new infrastructure? We don't really need. What we need is to expand the capacity of the existing infrastructure. So I strongly suspect that what's being done here is to enable new rights of way so they can monetize the 2 to 4 times subsidized new offshore wind farms and put that energy onto the grid. It's got nothing to do with batteries, because you can do all that by simply increasing the capacity of what you've got. You have to, in the countryside, you'd have to have some of these small pylons, they call it, and replace the pole pigs, as they call them in America, the transformers that are up on poles. But basically, we've got the grid we need. We just have to make it increase its capacity. If they're doing it to monetize increased renewable energy offshore that's making £179 per megawatt hour, which is what I suspect they're doing, then it's a pure cost to monetize the subsidy rackets.
So this move, they could actually increase the grid capacity without these pylons. Is that what you're saying?
But I don't know exactly, but they could certainly do it using the rights of way they've got to build their existing infrastructure, the pylons, the lines that everybody will know in the countryside. You don't have cables in the ground in the countryside like you do in the city. You have wires up on poles at 11 kV, 11,000 volts. So, you know, And if you're doing it locally in a city, then the wires are under the ground and they're going to have to be made fatter. What you don't need is new pylons. And you might need a replacement pylon, but you certainly don't need new rights of way to send the energy through to.
But the thing is madness. It takes years to build these things, surely. Look, Peter, if somebody said to you that you're going to have a pylon in your backyard, would you feel offended by that? Would you be up for that, or?
I think someone else, I think it was Benedict, used the word piecemeal. I'd feel like that. I'd be underwhelmed by it. And obviously, it's a time-limited period. If you've got high energy bills, then that's for life. So getting us a personal subsidy for a few years doesn't change that. I'm afraid what we really need is cheaper energy. And I know it'd be boring if I just read out the Labour manifesto, so I'm not going to do that.
Well, give us a bit of it.
But the one thing they would like to do is set up a national energy company, because it would be extremely expensive to renationalise an energy company. You'd need to have a few billion down the back of the sofa. But they've pledged to set up a new energy company called Great British Energy, which obviously start with a lower customer base. But in some industries, particularly rail as well, having a national provider is quite popular.
Well, I would never have privatised a lot of this anyway. I think it's absurd that we did, because these are vital resources. Benedict?
I completely agree with that, and I think it's something that you're seeing sort of a cross-party consensus on it. More and more people feel, and you're right to raise the railways on that as well, is that these are sort of naturally, this is, if you like, our national heritage, and these are fundamental things that you need in order to run a country. And I think people look at the global headwinds, they see what happens when one country goes to war with another, and they say, well, which are the countries that succeed? They're the ones that have the monopoly on their own sources of electricity and things like that. That's why Russia has not, in fact, lost the war as everybody said it was going to do in Ukraine, because it controls exactly what resources it needs ultimately, and exports a great deal of it. I mean, I'm going to always bang, when it comes to electricity, I'm always going to bang on about long-term planning, long-term infrastructure, and that for me is always going to be about nuclear energy. That's the thing that I think we should always be looking to prioritise above everything else. But I also think ultimately that, again, we're talking about what is Britain's natural resources. Well, it's an island made of coal. And if we're going to sort of bridge the gap in the short term to building nuclear power stations, we might as well try to subsidise the cost of that and keep our energy policies down by, over the next 6, 7, 8 years, however long it takes to get those reactors online, burning the coal. I know it's not universally popular, but that's what I'd do.
Well, I read a piece in the Telegraph that said that they'd actually overestimated the how fast the planet would warm, or something like that. There was a piece that was telling us that they'd actually got the figures wrong, and that they've overestimated, and they said it's going to happen quicker than it actually will happen, and that is a problem. So all these tweaks that they're making, it's worrying that whether they're actually necessary. And ultimately, Brian, who would own that? So National Grid, which belongs to us, right, as a state, will be us. But then, of course, we don't have control over the cost of the energy anyway. So how will we pay? How will they give us the £1,000? Will these be subsidies that come out of our taxes?
It'll be added to your bills, or in some way, shape, or either it'll be a cost to the taxpayer or a cost to the energy supply. By the way, I find myself in huge agreement with everybody here. I don't think if we sat round a table, we wouldn't disagree on anything. What we need is cheap, plentiful energy on a capable infrastructure, and we need it now. And that's it. And the CGB were doing a great job of that until they got privatised and sold off.
CGB,
and had they been left
what's the CGB?
That's the Central Electricity Generating Board, who used to do all this stuff.
Right.
They used to build the power stations, look after the grid. It was all an integrated system. So, and the basic point, if they'd been left to get on with it, they would have migrated to nuclear through CCGT gas, which is clean, to nuclear by now. We'd be well on the way.
Well, so I'm running out of time, so I'm going to ask you individually, Benedict Spence, would you accept a pylon for £1,000 a year off your bills in your backyard?
If you can prove to me that it will improve the efficiency and the cheapness of the national grid, then yes.
What about you, Brian Catt, yes or no?
No, on principle, because it's a waste. The money could be much better spent in another way on the grid, on developing a proper, cheaper, better grid.
Peter Edwards.
Well, I think Brian's answer was very good. I think no, because it's a bad idea. We'd all like the money, but it's just ill-considered, isn't it?
Yeah, right, lovely.
Thank you. I'll take 3 pylons then.
Thank you very much. Brian Catt and also Peter Edwards, thank you for your thoughts.